well, we don't, when I say Freemasonry, right, I'm not talking about your grandfather or your whatever who went to these things and basically just did like regular stuff. Unbeknownst to them, they're still being used or still were a part of a vast tentacle on this octopus that promoted or promotes the human trafficking of people and things like that. You know what I'm saying? So not every police is bad. However, they cover for the good ones and don't say nothing when the bad ones do stuff. So, and when they do, there's nobody good that steps up to back against the whack. So, you know what I'm saying, the system itself institutionally is in decline. You know what I'm saying? Because it was always set up from the beginning, and they never changed the aspect of what it was set up. It was set up to control and catch so-called slaves and control the movement and the upward mobility of a certain section of the population. You know what I'm saying? So that became a issue with how society was going to then integrate these people whose land it really is, but been now 400 years told opposite of that story. What's up with that? And so that led to the situation we in now, where the same people were put out to preserve the people came in and, or basically who set up the system to disenfranchise them, also then created a false narrative that they were now the protectors of their liberty, when the whole war was fought by them to keep a certain section of the population in servitude, in perpetual servitude, whether they was from this land or not. So because he came from the Reformist Party, you understand, this was a veiled lobbyist situation to move the agenda that led the pathway for people like Alex Jones and, you know what I'm saying, that type of narrative that was brought into the community, into the so-called black mind state through the conscious community, but always disavowed by the mainstream so-called black, what is perceived to be predominantly Christian, i.e. wanting to adapt and meld into basic society, keep their head down, get their money, this and that. Those type of people. Yet there was always somebody in your family with the knowledge, but the mainstream aspect of the family always kept that at bay. And so those people who were pushed to the fringe, who understood all this type of information and seeing what was happening, the actual research and stuff behind stuff, who studied under Henrik Clark and studied that type of stuff, went into a whole nother direction and then carved out for themselves a means to disseminate ideas and information from the various different groups that had come out of the destruction of the so-called Black liberation movements that started from when I believe her name was Colleen Coleman or something like that. The first sister, the dark-skinned black sister who was pregnant, that decided she wasn't going to get up. She was tired. But they couldn't use her because she was, pregnant at the time. And she was, more darker skinned. So the NAACP decided to go with the situation and basically, set it up with Rosa, what's her name? Parks, who was a part of the radical, what will become black feminist type of movement, or was used in that to promote the women's rights over the so-called black woman right, as if she was denied the seat because she was a woman. No, she was decided because she was a so-called black. But in order for Harvey Milk and the so-called gay mafia and these people to be able, David Geffen, these type of people to establish the agenda, they needed to have somebody that was more appealing. So in walks, Miss Parks, who I think at the time was like engaged to some white beatnik dude. So this is what I'm saying. Like this is when they want to move away to have people who speak for so-called black struggle or whatever. They want to move away from you can be articulate, but you can't articulate and like have a political stance outside of whatever group you're from. You know what I mean? Like, so you could be a Harry Belafonte and speak on stuff. You're not going to do certain things because you are still a part of the establishment. You know what I'm saying? Just like now. So what you see happening with the canon, in a sense, became a ritual amongst people in those circles to show their allegiance to everything. You know what I'm saying? Well, Dick Gregory said that there's two of them, just like what's his name said that there's two of them. You know what I mean? Dick Gregory said it was two of them. Ben Carson said it was two of them. And in the Gemini concept, it would make sense. Doubles and trans modifications are all byproducts of the type of cult and religion these people are part of. That's why I was saying with the Freemasonry thing, like these Freemasons that we're speaking about that's the glue that binds all these guys together. You see what I'm saying? No matter what country or whatever they're in, they all have little secret guilds and stuff like that they cover with what people perceive to be modern masonry as a means to generate power, whether amongst themselves or to keep the actual network going. You know what I mean? But this network, like we said, has been going on for thousands of years. You understand what I'm saying? And so you can't expect something that people are just waking up to and people that's now like, okay, now that the mainstream is picking up on it, now I'm going to pay attention. Those are the people that always get exposed, are the ones who are perpetuating everything the way it is. All based on the fact that as much as they're against everything, they don't want to physically change it enough to accept that it's broken. So we'll accept that the police are broken, so we'll defund the police, but the police get their mandate from the state, the municipality. You see what I'm saying? Nobody's talking about funding the municipality. Why? Because everybody wants the bus to run on time. Everybody wants to whatever. So regardless to what the problem is, how many people get murdered, people reduce it to, I still got to get to work. You understand what I'm saying? That type of mentality cannot be, you can't wake somebody like that up. You can't put something on a video and then expect them to, you know what I mean? Like want to do something about their situation, because by doing something about their situation, they first have to admit this situation, something's wrong with it. And nobody wants to admit that their situation is wrong if it's sustaining them. You see what I'm saying? That sustainability has created a singularity in the human psyche. So they have, in a sense, brutalized humanity so much that the extent of which they don't understand the very principles by which they live under. And that's why governments can do the stuff that they do to people, because people have no idea of a national identity. So that didn't just happen. Understand? Everybody, most of these people that are talking about that they're pro-America and pro this and pro that, most of those people are actually communists. They just don't realize it. because they've been slowly indoctrinated by different aspects of the KGB Spetsnaz through the very connection that exists between the so-called Chinese High Command and the Democratic Party specifically. But it's not limited to the Democratic Party. They're just the ones that was okay with the direct treason and getting the direct money. You know what I'm saying? They was the ones okay with it. The Republican ones that was doing it was more conservative. You see what I'm saying about it? They like, okay, we knew that Reagan was gonna break down the infrastructure of the country, but he came at a time when we needed to re-exert white supremacy. You see what I'm saying? In its new post-80s Rambo war, we're winning. So the United States poured all their money into that type of propaganda. You understand? Whereas the Soviets instead doubled down on it and created, like what you see in the cartoons with Black Widows, the red rooms and what they call Scarlet Towers, where they would basically raise children that would be totally American, but will be programmed at a certain time to activate, like what you see in the movie Saw. All the countries was doing that. And so to make people okay with that, they create movies like Manchurian Candidate with Frank Sinatra. You see what I'm saying? A mind control CIA slave / Omerta operative, the Jesuit Opus Dei, Giancana mob family. You understand? This is how they operate. So that is what democracy is. You understand? That's different than a Republican form of representation when it comes to a forum of political discourse. If you're dealing with a Republican, you're dealing with a representative form of government. So anything that I have that represents me and my estate or my trust is then a representative of my government. And then me and a group of people that have the same aspect then agree to make that happen. You understand? And then that becomes the nation. They're wiping out nationhood. They don't want to get away with that. So before they do, and people are okay with that because what people have done is put political subdivision in place of nation. So there is no so-called gay nation, right? But the perception is there's a majority that has a political power that is actually now can condemn other aspects of that. So that shows that whenever a so-called oppressed European-inspired ethnic group goes into mainstream so-called white society or is accepted by it, then they immediately become elitist and racist to the so-called black people or whoever else that they use to get there. Understand? That is what is the essence of social Darwinism. That's the essence of social Darwinism, which is also played out through what they call democratic socialism. All communist subgroups or subroutines to divert people away from having pride in the nation or the people or the family that they come from. All to destroy that, to then put this overarching reality that then everybody has to now give allegiance to because they didn't give enough. They have seen now by this overarching thing to have abandoned their national principles to go into this, you see? And this through coercion. You understand what I'm saying? The family of nations is the group of nations recognized as having equal status under international law. Oceans are regarded as common property of the family of nations and a group of nations united by common historical, political, ideological ties. Members of the British family of nations, let's say. But the basic concept is there. So under this, it basically says all the waters are free to all nations that are part of this family. The only nations that had to have territorial boundaries for their waters were that were not a part of this family. this ancient so-called family that spanned across the world. Because what is it said? Equal rights under the international law. Oceans are regarded from the family nation, a group of nations united by common historical, political, and ideological tie. Therefore, the tie that binds them really is how they identify through the nation, or how that is expressed. You have all of these different nations coming a part of the so-called United States, or all be a part of the United, let's say be a part of the Americas. For some reason, the United States has the dominant position. You see what I'm saying? So when somebody says that they're trained Marxists, you understand what they're saying? They again are practicing a form of division of social Darwinism. You know, because nationalism is a belief, creed, or political ideology that involves the individual identifying with or becoming attached to one's nation. Nationalism involves the national identity, in contrast with the related construct of patriotism, which involves the social conditioning and personal behaviors that support the state's decisions and action. So within that, within a nation, those people that exist in that nation also exist within the state, right? That state is the geographic state that they exist, the physical state, the mental state, but everybody is assumed under the citizenry to be a part of the geographic state. But that's not true. Is the army base in the same jurisdiction as the people who live outside the army base? Is the consulate under the same jurisdiction as the people that live outside the consulate? Is the so-called reservation under the same jurisdiction, wink wink, of the same people outside the reservation? No. So that means that you can be on one landmass and be in a totally different jurisdiction, right? Okay. Democratic socialism is a political ideology advocating the democratic political system along with socialist economic system. This may refer to extending principles of democracy in the economy, such as through cooperatives, corporations, or workplace democracy. That's like slave labor. That's sweatshops. You understand what I'm saying? That's poachers. That's traffickers. Or may simply refer to the trends of socialism that emphasize democratic principles as inalienable from their political project. There is no exact definition of democratic socialism. Some forms of democratic socialism overlap with social democracy, while other forms reject social democratic reformism. See, reformism, the Reformist Party, in favor of revolutionary methods. Isn't that what, which then overlap with what? Revolutionary socialism. This dude came from Reformist Party. The Reformist Party deals with democratic reformism in the form of what? Favor of more revolutionary methods. Isn't that what this dude did? Took everybody out of NAT, took everybody out of GAFTA, took everybody NAT, GAFTA, the WHO, taking people out of everything. The UPU, taking the United States out of everything. These people then wrapped the so-called republic up in through the democracy. NATO took them out of that. You know what I'm saying? These were the direct pipelines that the networks was using to maintain the stranglehold over the nations, and the brainchild coming through Israel through the so-called Mossad network, because they were the all the premier pied de resistance of blackmail and espionage. The motto of the Mossad is war by deception. The Mossad takes the position, or Israel takes the position, from not the Torah, but of the Talmud. And in the Talmud, it says that everybody that's not Jewish has to be a slave of everybody that is in the new kingdom when Lucifer takes over. So the agenda for them is that. You know what I'm saying? And so politics, or the art of diplomacy, the difference between a rebel and, let's say, a diplomat, is that the rebel is not going to stand for that and going to pick up guns and go against it. Right, I'm saying? But in the very instance of it doing that, it is still, that individual is, by definition, then, of the person is trying to overthrow a rebel, even though what they may be rebelling against is good. You see? But historically, the way they've set it up, the way people understand or disseminate history, this person would then be seen as that, especially if it's dark skin. You know what I'm saying? Whereas democratic socialism doesn't mean everybody gets the same vote. It just means that everybody who votes get their votes counted. And then a certain group of people make the decision for everybody else. You understand? So communism in its European or whatever modern form or whatever they talk about was just a variation of the European system that was initiated through a guy named Adam Smith in a series of treaties called The Wealth of Nations. Some people say there's a conspiracy that says that Adam Smith was actually Adam Weishaupt. Just like there's another one that says that Adam Weishaupt, that Adam Smith was actually George Washington. You understand? Now, it's absurd that stuff like that appears. Historically, there are stranger things still, you know what I mean, that don't necessarily count things like that out, because we have to remember everything that we know about the history was given to us by the people who were down with the lie, and then the advantage of never going back to the servitude that the ones who came into civilization were put under. And under the servitude were then given a so-called religion that was not anchored to their pagan ways that they had been used to living. These people that you see as the white Europeans, and this is where these people come from, really. You know what I mean? They were the little janissaries or Mameluke or whatever you want to call them. And through things like Freemasonry, they were freed and accepted by certain houses and then brought into the means of civilization, and then were given what they call delegates, or places where they could have limited dominion and process other people that was like them. This was the white slavery that existed on earth prior to the fall of the empire, and then the conversion, in which now we think, we were the only slaves on planet, even though that it's not saying it's impossible, but the very term Slav means the people that are not the people that you come from. So whether they wanted to be that or not, it couldn't be. So when we speak of the well, the thing is, to do that, they would have to also deal with what they refer to as diversity of citizenship. And when you deal with diversity of citizenship, then it's basically that everybody go back to their own country that's not from here. And they can't even really bring that up. They'll talk about adrenochrome before they talk about that, you dig? Because to get into that now means that there's actively something that can be done about this. And the issues that came with dealing with these people have been existing for years. And what to do with the evolution of things, where people actually brought cases against the ancient Moors and stuff to figure out, how to process these things. And so the situation that we find ourselves is not the, believe it or not, the worst it could be, because it was actually worse before. At least in this era, we're starting to wake up to the fact that we don't have to go anywhere to be where we're from. And the fact that everybody wants to be from here. You know what I mean? Says that, or wants to be here, says that. It's just to be here, they gotta go into the whole system by which they're oppressed, and then they get, everybody can do that because the system is based on everybody. How do you say? Being under one dominion. So as people wake up to the fact that they could actually have something of their own, they force the people now into this new reality. See what I'm saying? Where the government has even more control than we thought that it did. But it still actually doesn't. It does so long as people allow it to. So the government's perspective is,
let's see how far we can push the envelope.
Yeah, let's see how far we can do it. If they don't say nothing, then they must mean that they're okay with it. And if they say something if they too much against it, then we'll act like they're trying to shut us down, you see, even though we know that they should be doing it. So this is the problem with politics in general. So as you see, they're not really practicing democracy at all. They're actually practicing democratic socialism, which itself, again, is a form of cronyism that was initiated into the system through the so-called Cold War, because, like I said, the KGB instigated through media, specifically, the means to get people to accept lower standards. You know what I'm saying? Look at the rise of things like crime from the time things like New Jack City and these types of movies come up. There's always a correlation. You know what I'm saying? But to call it out, they will call out the fact that the crime is happening, but they won't call out the purveying nature of it through the very system, through the Hollywood movies and stuff that actually promote that. You know what I'm saying? That's how you know that it all benefits them. It benefits them to keep making slave movies and making sure that we remember that we don't have a nationality, and that these people that these things did these great things historically were all just individuals, and that there's really no way that you could actually have your own thing again, even though everybody else around you does. And you should be okay with that because things are actually getting better. You know what I'm saying? So peep this. So, like I said, these things that you see, they were the opposite of the original people who actually was in control of them. And then it came to a point where they were actually wiped out, and a lot of them had to go. I forgot what the Buddha Sheikh name was, but he came one day and got tired of them and just started executing them all. And so a lot of them escaped back to Europe, and then they became butlers for those. So when you see them dressed in the petticoats like George Washington and them, this is why you would see Thomas Jefferson and these people with Qurans and stuff, because a lot of them were the mulatto children of these grand beys, as you say, and they also were now serving them as squires or esquires because they were serving the nobles. And so that suit that we think that the Europeans was wearing as like their costume and stuff, that was actually what the butlers in them wore. You know what I'm saying? Moors, we was addressing on some whole other, which we'll see in a minute. Somebody sent me this on Facebook. Big up to them. In this case, the term nación is equivalent to civilizado. In still different sense, the term is employed when referring to certain personality trait that one believes to be congenial in Indians or Spaniards, and in this case, one says, eso es de nación, i.e., by birth. The term mortal, literally Moor, is commonly used when referring to the ancient Indians of the valley and the village, which emphasize Indian in expression the term of the time of the Moors. What time was that? That brings us to this right here, where we can see Granada and Hispania and the Isle of Flowers and Mauritania and all of that over here. This is the Red Sea. Whenever you see the septentrial maps and they're not filled in, those were the areas that they were still wild with what they say the super ancient sort of old ones were still at. So when speaking again of the ancient Spaniards or the ancient Moors, whatever, you again are talking about us as their descendants today. Yet to activate that as a people would then mean we would then have to identify with a certain worldview. And then once that's put into practice, everybody within that scope then employ that, you know what I mean, in their thing in a similar fashion. Because all Moors were part of the empire, right? Let's say by blood, but not everybody was necessarily of the same thing. You have Moors who were what you would call today Hebrew, who kept the covenant. There were Moors who were Zoroastrian or whatever, right? But they still did business with those of their family that's like today. Like you might have a brother that's Hebrew Israelite, and then your mother's a Christian, and then your pops was Nation of Islam. You know what I'm saying? That's nothing new. It's what's been going on in our family. Islam. So they created a dual reality by which we would split ourselves, literally. And in the process of that, created a way to extract money from that exchange. And that's where what we today talk about the straw person and all of this birth certificate and all that other stuff that we do to break away from the thing, because that knowledge, in a sense, at one time was preserved within people who, again, identify with the same thing. But then after the prophet, for instance, was gone, they wanted to reorganize things in a manner that brought them in league with the devil in the form of, 501c3s and things like that. Yet, if they were to be used in the context of actually helping people, you know what I'm saying, then it would have been all good. But it wasn't. You see? So, therefore, a lot of people are basically going from one church to the next, unfortunately. Yet it doesn't mean that the overall spirit of the people can't unify around the basic tenets that exist, which is one, we can prove through things like this congressional globe designation that the land belonged to the ancient Mauritanian races. Those ancient Mauritanians are the so-called ancient Indians that we just read about in the other clip. And the fact that it belonged to the Moorish people and their Indian associates, to whom Mexico belonged, because the kingdom of what we would call the original city founded by Enoch, or the true necropolis, was again here in Mexico, and had trade routes. You see how it goes across the four in the water, but you see how the lines go in the cross. Because all of that is connected to the ancient Carthaginian builders, or Carthaginian builders, who established all of their kingdoms and trade routes or whatever along the 33rd parallel. 33rd parallel is what they dealt with when they dealt with the Mason-Dixon line, and when they dealt with the new moving of the Greenwich line, 70s, when they first was basically going through their first phase of reconstruction. Therefore, Islam, as we understand Islam, being is given to us from a foreign perspective, is negative to the original experience that our predecessors who were practicing Islam before the so-called religion was coined in the 7th century, because it really come from somewhere. So if we can find elements of it, like I said, Allah written as Allah Lam Lam Ha on the Temple of Abydos, and we can trace that back how many thousand upon thousand upon thousand years, then this is why in the plus lessons it asks what is the birth record for the Nation of Islam, and it says the Nation of Islam has no birth record. It's the Nation of Islam in that degree is not the religious group that we're talking about now. We're talking about all of us as the descendants of the original descendants of the high self, or the higher self, because that's really what Allah is. Even when we talk about common law and stuff like that, common law, the law of the commoners, all of that is still canon law. You understand? It's still the Roman canon version. We are the mortals. So like you'll have people tell you, oh, well, more that just means this in Greek. When whoever starts the definition or the discussion of Moors, first of all, usually people telling you this are people that aren't Moors. So that's like me telling somebody who grew up in Shenzhen, China, what the noodles and stuff was like. You know what I'm saying? Just because I had noodles here. You understand what I'm saying? It's not the same thing. So if you're not living the culture or understand, approved, or divine the fact that these are your people, then you're speaking on something again from the opposite. The only time that I think people can speak on other people's things is when those things have become militarized or weaponized against a specific group. Because that's what it means to be American, right? Fight for love, liberty, truth, justice, what? The American way, right? That's how we were brainwashed from the outset, right? So in that, you have to understand that anybody dating you using another person's nationality to do so sounds even crazier than you see what I'm saying, from what you're saying. See what I'm saying? That's like me saying, oh, well, your name is Charles, but it's really Carlos because it was the Spanish that did it first. Okay. But the person that's telling you that is like Korean. You know what I'm saying? Like, okay, you're putting me on, but for what purpose? That's not you. That's not even the people that you even identify with. You don't even know no Spanish people. You know what I'm saying? So when they tell you, okay, more this means this in Greek, that means that they're going and dating it from the perspective of when Western society says that what? That society started. So that means they're what? They're collaborating and using the same oppressor's language or same oppressor's date to date when you were called what you have always. Some people can regress themselves to the point of their conception. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's possible. You dig? But for the majority of humans, we don't get that knowledge until we walking out of here. You know what I mean? So, again, if you're going to date it, don't date it from the people who they call Greeks, who the term Greek didn't even exist. until Reconstruction. Those people were ancient Peloponnesians. But that sound too much like Melanesian or Asian. You know, they don't like that. So Greek, that sound more European. You know what I mean? You dig? So if you're gonna date it, go back to when it was on the pyramid walls. You know what I'm saying? Go back to the Palermo stele and what it really means. I mean, high priest. High priest of what? Anu or Anu. Who's Anu? Anu is Anubis, Anpu, right? The so-called who they told you was a jackal. How many lectures you went to with these guys from back in the days, and they showing you all these Egyptian things, and they show you Anpu, and they say, oh, that's the jackal or the dingo or whatever. Not telling you this, the Zolo dog from Mexico. Wouldn't that have given you a different perspective of what you paying attention to? Wouldn't it give you more of a connection? Wow, that's a dog here in America? You mean that's a native dog to Mexico? That's a dog that I can actually get now? You understand? And it's a dog that's jet black, full of melanin. So much melanin that it can't produce enough calcium in its teeth because it's so rich. You know what I'm saying? So this is what I mean about, again, perception and letting other people define the reality, because then we flip that. Then right after the Egyptian, we get the Latin, the mortals, right? Latin. Then we get the Greek. But even before then, we get the Phoenician, which is Moab, right? So then we got Schwartz and all this other stuff. So when they start doing that, what they're doing is what they say that they don't like is done to them. They're using somebody else's culture to define you. So that's the basis of what? Colonialism, right? That's another form of expectation. That's a form of what? Denationalization. That's right. But that owl, they told you that owl was from the Illuminati, though. Right? Drake is Illuminati. That's the same owl on his joint from the Illuminati. There was no owls before them. So they started putting on clothes and telling you about Bohemian Grove and all of that. And this is not to negate people who are like just coming into consciousness and feeling like, oh, whoa, this is like crazy. Because it is. But what you gotta understand is that everything that these people got, they got from intermarrying into that. And we always let them know that, to the point we would put it in architecture. Like, this is the Royal Ark from Germany. This is the Moor. This was the Moor and his noble family that owned it. This was the slaves. See them under the jaws with the keys? This was a slave that was raised up to have his white baby. You understand? See her sitting on the moon like Ishtar? This is some image of Ishtar, but this is in Germany. Look up images of Ishtar and you'll see a woman holding a baby standing on top of a crescent moon. But look, he's holding the cross of St. George of Rome. But remember, this is in Germany. You see what I'm saying? So what does the devil do to explain this confusion? Oh, well, they had different kingdoms in Europe, and, there was France and Britain and all that. But there was no France. That was Gaul. There was no England. That was Albion. You see what I'm saying? So obviously it was something else. And these guys married into it and then freed up some of these slaves that allowed them to have limited dominion. And then when it got too much, they started to then enslave them again, because this was all part of the process of bringing them back into the human family. And this is what they don't want to deal with. But many Caucasian people of all denominations of Caucasity have come out and agreed and wrote books on what I'm saying. Normandy, the Normans, again, noir. Remember that French noir means what? So the Normans was white black men? That's what we're saying? That makes sense? Yes, and they came in and switched the whole structure of Europe in 1066, right? They came through and they called them the Buccaneers. Why? Because they brought with them the buckwheat. Because it didn't exist in that place. Because the savage Europeans had ate it all up and burned it all up. So the Moors came back under the guise of the Normans, right? Got rid of everything, got rid of the carcasses and stuff, and then brought the buckwheat and then fed Europe again, helped bring them out the dark. Because this is what we do. This is what we always do. We're the first ones to put the world in timeout when we shut Rome down. That's a fact. But they done gave you that credit took that credit from you and gave it to the Pale Arabs. And who did that? A guy named Arthur Wasserman, right? Who changed his name to Mohammed something, right? White man, and got the Arab guys to go along with it. You understand? And they'll do that because they don't want to go back to stuff like this. Black people, you understand what I'm saying? Like, that's the power and majesty of the people that we really come from, and in their true form. Because it's beauty and conquest almost simultaneously. Like, you can watch, like, we was just watching the Trinidad James video, right? And it's grossly ignorant, right? It's grossly derogatory, all of that. But you know what? That shit bumped, man. It was really a dope song. You see what I'm saying? That's what I mean. Ugly conquest, like ugly majesty. It's something horrible, but it's still so fly that when I think about it, he's the reason niggas is wearing gold chain in the game now. Like, everybody was gold and diamonds and all of that. Remember that? Everything was platinum plus palladium. Like, we wearing, like, my diamonds are so crazy. It's just a big diamond on my neck. He came out and slowed it all down, and then came with a nationality, rocking a flag, right? Trinidad. But wait, this nigga is in Houston or wherever he from. Like, how is this? You see what I'm saying? That's not nothing new. Imagine now us being back in 1282, and this dude just come through like that, like a troubadour or something, and drop like, oh, this dude word. And then we be like, you know what? We got some gold. We gonna make us some chains. And then boom, this is like, you see what I'm saying? Because we're people like that. You know what I mean? We're not necessarily going to do everything, but certain things was thing. And like I said, everything affects, the littlest thing we do affects the culture in the greatest way. So it's so effective right now with the COVID fake hoax thing that they actually asking this guy Bill Gates about it. But he actually talking about it and then saying, well, if I talk about it, it's like I'm giving it life, because it's true. So they already came out with the thing that said that all of the numbers was fake, because they needed the numbers up to be able to justify the rollout for all of the other stuff they're doing. And because of that, we know that they actually created the patent specifically in 2006. The patent number for it was US 20062578852. That was for a patent for severe acute respiratory syndrome. So it's a syndrome, not a virus. Then they sold that company who did it was called Chiron. Chiron is one of the moons, is another name for Mars and the city of Egypt, Cairo. Right? Red. Then they sold that to GlaxoSmithKline, who then shared it with another company in Europe and created the vaccine under EP 3172319B1 in 2014. So this was the fail-safe of what I'm talking about as it happened. The decoy, again, while this was happening, was whatever was going on in 2014, which I think at the time was when they was first hearing about the Benghazi scandal and all that. So when you look at these distribution transport places, these are also the maps of where all its human trafficking is going. It's like if you overlay the human traffic map with this is just the same place. So as I told people, everybody, thank you, that's right. And Chiron is retrograde. So all of this is congruent to the denationalization of the people, especially now that the gold now basically is behind the money again. Because now with the money and the gold, that now shuts down the ability for them to overspend anything. That's why they never want money behind nothing, gold behind nothing. Because when there's no gold behind it, you could spend what you want. It's called a high-end surplus, dividend surplus, or whatever. But specifically, there's no means for them to be able to basically rob the way that they've been doing legally. So what the gold does is it puts a spending cap on how much you can basically withdraw, because you can only base that on as much gold as you have in the circulation, which then automatically drives the price of gold up, which then creates a run on gold, right? Which now is also freed up because of all of the stuff they done seized from Rothschild and them. So Rothschild and them done send a lot of their money to the Bank of China. The People's Bank of China is Rothschild. See what I'm saying? And these are also the people who low-key fund the DNC. So much to the point that they had a thing somebody showed me today where they had a chick who ran on while Casio or whatever the chick was talking, and she had a shirt that said save the planet by eating the babies. And she basically, they gave this chick almost the floor for like 2 minutes to talk about how to save the planet. They need to eat the babies, right? And the thing is, what's crazy is nobody seemed to like be totally outraged, including her, the Ocasio chick, which we know, what she down with. But I'm just saying, it didn't seem to be like a big thing. So even when they took her out, it wasn't like they made it like the issue that should have been made, especially in the climate that all of this stuff is coming out. You see? So this normalization process that's being fostered by these guys are being brought in, and they're creating these fake new terms. One of these new terms, again, is age fluid, right? Age fluid is a person whose identity is not fixed and changes over time or depending on the situation. So this is how a grown man can believe or feel to be a little girl or a little boy and play with little girls, little boys under that perception, and then by law, because this is his so-called gender neutrality or whatever, it's not pedophilia. They also have a new designation called clover gender. Ready for that? They're going to tell you that you have a clover gender, and the clover gender is the child who is actually an adult trapped in a child's body. So if you get the child to say that it's clover gender, then again, it's not pedophilia. You see what I'm saying? You see how easy the system is? When you say yes to one instance of evil, you're saying yes to it all at once. And you have so-called black and white people championing this nonsense. You understand? Because this is not just, it has nothing, it's not just the sexual deviancy aspect of it. It's the need to get others to accept the normality of it. That is the psychosis. That's the control freak, commie, pinko, like totalitarian thing where it's not just enough that I'm doing this to you. You gotta like it, and you gotta work with me to get others to like it too. That's the mob mentality. That's what you really are fighting against, really, because these people don't know what they are. And the less they identify what they are, the more likely it is that people become abused, because there's no definition, and that's what they're doing. That's what Blurred Lines with Pharrell and all of that was really saying. We're blurring it, so you don't know what's going on. You don't know what you're looking at. So you can look at somebody and not see who that person is because of marketing and how those people are given to you in a time. This one of the #1 traffickers. That's this dude's mother. Her organization was just investigated and a part of the whole human trafficking children's gang operation going back all the way to 1972. This is her son. This is fact. This ain't made up. This ain't a conspiracy. Why ain't nobody, how come nobody talk about this is his mom's? How come nobody, that's not relevant to the story? That's not relevant to the human trafficking things going on? That's not relevant to the COVID thing? None of this relevant, right? Let it have been R. Kelly. It'd have been a rap. Let it have been R. Kelly and Little Kim. It'd have been over. Everybody would have known. See, and he comes from a demonic mother. But no, we got to make it again. How many times the people done use the term Mother Teresa in a good way over the decades? You understand? Over the decades, how many people put that in a good way while at the same time they doing that, she's straight up selling kids and worse. What's going on, bro? It's all, remember, Shakespeare told you, all the world's a stage and everyone is just is but a player. And what do rappers call themselves? We players, right? Remember that era where everybody was a player? Living. We literally living the narrative. Don't even realize it. Yeah, remember this dude? Okay, you know this chick. Because again, it can't be conspiracy if it's facts. That's what be bugging me out with people. It's like that operative, you can look it up right now. It's on the WikiLeaks. Document number 1035-960, where they said how they implement the term conspiracy theory into the populace and inject it as a information blocker to inhibit the mind from accepting anything that may actually be true, that may hamper national security. They out of here. Yeah, so the sovereign citizen thing, the patriot movement thing, the teabag movement, it's all the same stuff. And what happened, like I said, confusing the situation. The Caucasians realized that they don't have no wins in terms of when it comes to getting out of the system that they themselves have been a part of from the beginning. So they got to find ways around it. So they do that through us. And then through us, what unites them with the so-called blacks that help them is the Christianity. The Christianity is the gateway for the Freemasonry. The Freemasonry is the gateway for the occult, satanic stuff. And then that's the unification with Rome. That's how it works. That's why they're able to get away with it all, because they keep using the same people, but then taking them out. Put one to sleep, put the other one out in the public. Swap one out, swap one's out's gender, and then put the life model decoy out there. They read this stuff, man. People, since this stuff has been going on, these people done confirmed everything, because it's all based upon, again, this Freemasonic war going on between the North and the South. And it always has been. It never stopped, because this war with the North and the South is the same war between Rome and Carthage, between Christianity and Islam. It's the same thing. Castile and the Moors. It's because it's the descendants of the same people fighting. The only thing half of them now is hooked up with the enemy on the hyperdimensional tip. So they got access to the stuff that we've been forgotten, and then have re-engineered it, reverse engineered it, and now using it against us. So like I said, it's not that the sovereign citizens is looking like this. If anybody standing up against tyranny should be applauded. They shouldn't be ridiculed and stuff. You know what I'm saying? That's different. You just defending your rights and you standing up for yourself is different than, you know, you trying to do that to get out of something that you know you did, or you taking something that you didn't really understand how to seize. That's different. So these police is wrong from the beginning because there's no real mandate or sanction for them to do that, to do anything that they're really doing. They're only doing that to maintain what they maintain. And like I said, it's a Freemasonic thing. And now the true puppet masters of it all is again coming down to China, China, the Democratic Party, the elements, the liberal Republicans, and these people identifying with these terrorist movements like Antifa, Planned Parenthood, all of these things, right? So, like I said, Mossad had the Jelaine chick who was the handler for Epstein, and she was able to maintain a dossier list on everybody because the list that she had wasn't just hers. That's the list that she inherited from Wexner, who inherited it from Epstein, who inherited it from Mossad Central, whoever his handler was, going all the way back now to the beginnings of the so-called state of Israel. You gotta understand when these dudes are saying that they Hebrew Israelites and all, you gotta understand there was no Israel on earth until 1948. Until Lord Balfour, a Caucasian man, a fake so-called Jew, who was actually also a fake British person, established himself to give them sway over the country and take it from the original so-called people that was already there. And he employed people like this guy, T.S. Lawrence, or Lawrence of Arabia, to help establish the Arabian so-called peninsula and destabilize it enough so that way when it was finally ready to go by 48 or whatever, and by the time they actually take Israel now by 67, the groundwork was already laid. People now calling this part of Africa the Middle East. How many times you seen on TV black people, white people, people from Asia, people from Africa refer to that portion of the continent as the Middle East, when that itself is a colonial term that everybody done said is colonial? Because this dude T.S. Lawrence again was serving the MI5, and they are all Jewish run as well. Because in order for the Caucasian people to be seen as the Jews, they would have to go through some sort of mass oppression. And they had never been through that on earth, because even when they were a slave race, global slave race, they weren't rebelling to get out of that. Very few of them actually rebelled. Most of them just went in back to the system. That's what books like Candide by Voltaire and what you call it? Yeah, like Candide and another one that talks about it. Can't think of it right now. But specifically in those time periods. So this chick was actually okay. We know that this chick, Epstein's handler, was the daughter of the head Grand Master Mason of the B'nai B'rith, which is the Jewish equivalent of the Scottish Rite, or what we call Jesuit order, you know. And they basically work together. And they are all part of the Brotherhood of Death. They're the guys that's funding the Democratic Party through black men, because they got all of these guys on various islands all over the world, multiple times engaging in all types of haram. And so the policies that are enforced on us and the killings and the murders and stuff like that, all of that is coming from the descendants and the people who set that plan up. So one of those people was this chick's mother. This chick's father, Robert Maxwell. Another guy was this dude who was one of Maxwell's peoples. Because in the white Hitler's armies, he had 150,000 Ashkenazi and Slavic Jews that was willing to go and kill their own people and do all of that, and as Jews. And then after that, they all got to go to Argentina. And because Argentina had already started wiping out its original people from the late 1700s, by the 1900s and all of that, they was just welcoming, and he just finished it out and then used the rest of the populace for experiments. That's why Argentina got one of the highest twin rates in the world and all of that, because AKA the boys of Brazil was out there putting in the lab work under Mengele and the rest of them. This devil on the left is the Mufti of Berlin. This is another Jewish guy who became a Muslim, and they went to basically take over Jerusalem. He was the one that helped and urged the white Hitler to set up the death camps and all that type of stuff, and through them created the agreement of what became the Muslim or Nazi Brotherhood. For a book on this you want to get a book called The Pink Swastika. There's another book called Muslim Nazis, a couple of other ones. These are the guys that eventually worked with the Wahhabist Jews of the Saudi Arabian families and consolidated their power over the last of the true nobilities over there, and made basically all of them, all of the future kings would be daughters of slaves, sons of slaves. So this guy was one of the people who was handling Maxwell. Maxwell had a daughter named Jelaine. Y'all know that, right? Y'all know that, right? Okay. But how many people know that Jelaine had a sister? Well, actually, she had a brother. She had a brother named Michael. This is Michael. This is Michael Maxwell. This is Jelaine's brother. But he went missing at a time, and then he reappeared as Marina. You understand? This is the Abramovich chick. The Abramovich chick is really a dude. That dude is Jelaine Maxwell's brother, sister. So what I'm showing you is how interconnected the reality is around you, that they could perceive and put somebody. Now she only became known to the hip hop community. Why? Because she did a video with who? Exactly. This is also the one that's in the emails about the spirit cooking and eating the people, right? Right. She also on the flight list. But this is a he. This is how Mossad, CIA, and these people work people. This is called a cutout. Is a book you can get called the Encyclopedia of Espionage. It's about the size of a Webster's dictionary. Read it. Get it. Yes. This is also the one that hooked up with Bill Gates, right? For his new VR interactive joint, right? To give them access to your cerebral cortex, i.e. your pineal organ, correct? So if this is a dude and was a girl, right? So this the only ones. These the only ones out in that environment doing that. How many movies have you seen? See, I'm telling you, the whole dress thing and dressing up like women is deeper than what Dave Chappelle and these people talking about. It's a ritual that they put spies through. You understand? And everybody is down with it. It has nothing to do with your color and none of that. It has to do with what you are willing to do and how far you're willing to go to serve people. And all roads lead back to the same people. You understand? This is a war against humanity. Remember when Sammy Davis Jr. was thinking about the Candyman? Candyman is Lucifer. Remember what Candyman can? Then they make a horror movie about the Candyman that took place in Cabrini Projects. Remember? Do you know that the projects were a continuation of the Negro Project, and the Negro Project was the original name for Planned Parenthood, or is the original name for Planned Parenthood, started by Margaret Sanger, daughter of the American Revolution, heroin and cocaine addict? Prostitute who died penniless and syphilitic and was almost beat to death by H.G. Wells, who was one of her lovers. Look it up, man. So what I'm saying right here, this is the order. This is the same order that the dude that popped Michael Jackson in. This is the same order that what's his name is in. All these people, they all part of the same thing. Right, Knights Malta. But they was all just wiped out from the Grandmaster on down. Your man Drumpf, ordering hits, sending secret police out. Murking people. Why? This is why they want, things like this is why they want it. So that way you don't know who's a man and who's a woman. This is why. They've been doing it. They've been doing it in your face for years, man. They would do I remember when they showed this on TV. When he first got elected, this devil. Allegedly he executed now, so who knows. This devil. So you got the pyramid. He's going in on these kids, unfortunately. So again, they are so comfortable for so many years. Think about it. You've been doing something for 243 years. And then one day somebody say, nah, you can't do that no more. You bugging. What are you talking about? Your grandpa was down. You know what I'm saying? Like this is what's going on. This is what's going on. So again, this is the image of Allah, again showing and proving that I'm not crazy. And as Allah is at this thing, again, it had nothing to do with it can't be in the sun temple, but it's the name of the moon god. You see how these niggas be lying? Just be lying. Just be lying. Just because they just I just hate more. So I just don't know. They're too proud. So I'm gonna just say this. Yeah, the last one I did got these niggas in their feelings. One dude did a whole tape. In the back, you just hear him chain smoking. Like he just it's like, damn, this nigga. I don't even, but you don't know, dude. I don't even watch the shit after I put them out. So you might as well be mad at a ghost. Because I'm off to the next one. You know what I mean? You know, and you don't got no nationality. It's like, you playing. Anyway, so yeah, so in the red houses, or for those that aren't in the red house, that's how they have you in your vestment, in your raiment. Because they know that the true power is vested in the Moorish Empire. However, you don't know. And there's no benefit in them putting you on to that if you can't do nothing about it. So they just gonna keep living off of it. So when they were saying that Moors can't be Hebrews and all this garbage that they talking about today, these are actually Moorish Hebrews. But again, they're giving you the Moorish as the designation to let them know that they're still a part of a nation. The Moors are part of a nation. The Hebrews are part of a tribe. They're part of tribes. And those tribes are really just aspects of zodiac signs that became actual physical tribes in 1948. Prior to that, we accepted each other in our tribal capacities, but recognized ourselves in our national identities. So that puts the dead on that. This is why the acacia leaf is so important and is always placed on the grave of Hiram, because it represents them taking control of the empire. You know what I'm saying? In our stead, because we are asleep. And so because they have literally created nothing, they've only just flipped what people remember and the designation where those things were. They created a perpetual need to be led. And so when the Jewish people saw what the Moorish Zionist Hebrews of Harlem had done and the beautiful communities that they had created, they decided that they wanted it so for themselves. And so they petitioned Lord Balfour through Rothschild to establish for them a place to have for the European Jews that they had allowed to be slaughtered, that Rothschild and them allowed to be slaughtered, to give them the right to have a state. So they said, okay, you want to be your own state and we're going to be able to run all of our money and everything through that. Then what we're going to do is after that, then we're going to run all of our business through you guys. And then through you guys, we'll continue to control the world. And then they're like, bet. And so by the time the war goes down to 67, they've already compromised half of the so-called world leaders, who then had to set up and compromise other people who were coming up under them. And they all compromised, and then they all like, whatever. And so now they got the game on smash to the point where they openly talking about adrenochrome. You know now that the real stuff is about to come out. Because that ain't nothing. You know what I'm saying? What the Chrissy Teigen thing just showed everybody was that it's okay, was that what's her name? Was that Twitter, just like Facebook, are pro-pedophile, just like TED Talks pro-pedophile. So as the world is moving to this realization that it's either this or that, like Black Sheep Ben told us, they want to change the complexion of the world around us, so that way we don't recognize each other enough to do anything about it. So like I showed and proved that the Ethiopian thing started once they installed pharaohs in Egypt. Remember, pharaoh is actually a word for the people over here, for the female rulers of the Montaka, or what they call the Montauk Moors / Indians here in America. And it was through Ptolemy and them, after their introduction in Babylon and taking Babylon and all that. Thank you, Montakua. Thank you. And it wasn't until that point that they started to get into the bloodletting stuff and the adrenochrome stuff. So when people get getting into all of the great stuff with Egypt and how the pharaohs did this, what you gotta understand is that towards the new kingdom, towards the last real kingdom was Ramses in them. After that, they was into stuff like this. Forgive me, I don't know what book this is from, but one of my Moors sent me the clip. Pharaoh, king of Egypt, he asked his wise men and sorcerers to cure him. And his wise men and sorcerers said unto him that if the blood of the little children were put into the wounds, and he would be healed. And Pharaoh hearkened to them and sent his ministers to Goshen. Okay? So now on the exotic map, I believe Goshen is what we would call Maryland. To the children of Israel and to take their little children. The Pharaoh's ministers went and took the infants of the children of Israel from the bosoms of their mothers by force, and they brought them to the Pharaoh daily, a child each day. And the physicians killed them and applied them to the plague. Thus did they all the days. Alright? So you're gonna have to take the good and the bad. You know what I mean? All of these dudes is always talking about the aspects of that and the priesthood, which you gotta understand the people that was doing this was the priests. This is why the high priest of Anu, the Moors, left and set up other stuff and started warring against these guys. You understand? These guys, these Pharaoh descendants, basically all integrated and helped support what would become the kingdom of what we call Israel, right? Which was descendant of some of the children that survived of Israel that merged and adopted the Canaan, Phoenician ideology. And then through Abraham flipped it, or who they say Abraham flipped it to their liking, and then they made themselves a nation. But it all up until Solomon. And then after Solomon, what happened? Solomon started working with demons, right? Working with demons, marrying all types of other uncivilized women, right? Put spells on them, right? Having orgies in the tabernacle, like you bugging. You bugging. And ever since then, and then was responsible for the guilds, and then helped create the guild, and basically harbored the people that killed Hiram, who built the temple for him in the first place. And who was Hiram? What nationality was Hiram? In the story that these people have been reenacting. They've been reenacting a murder. Reenacting a murder, man, for the past 6,000 years. No, Solomon was the Hebrew. What nationality was Hiram? Phoenician, thank you. See? Giving them the real knowledge, trying to put them on, and what do? So I'm showing this because this is an image of King Roderick, the last so-called Visigothic king. Remember I told you that the Visigoths was melanated too? But they was Christian Romans that was left over. This is your boy, Victor the First, aka Selassie, showing you the connection from the wild New Kingdom Egyptians to the Ptolemaic Egyptians to the so-called Sabaeans, then to the Ethiopic Romans, and then all of this then goes centered through the Kingdom of Italy, right? Which is Rome, which is the Vatican, to the point that they created a satellite kingdom, what? Byzantine, right? And Byzantine paid money to who? Who was Byzantine paying money to? Because Byzantine was the western portion, the eastern portion of the Roman Empire. So who was they paying tribute to? True, but like what group? Ethiopia, yes. The Abyssinians, the Axumites specifically, the ones who moved the capital from the original Ethiopians, Bella, the so-called real Falashim, right? The real Jews, right? And then moved it up there and then became Coptic, and then used the Coptic thing to seal their, to hide their gods. It's the same gods. Look at the image of Mithra and then look at the one they got of Jesus, their version. It's the same thing. So what I'm also saying is that we've been so indoctrinated with the racism, with the white man, the devil, with the black man is always the hero thing that we missing, that these dudes have been playing us. You dig what I'm saying? Like this conglomeration, this unification of Christianity as a juxtaposition to our true nationality, right? As descendants of the different Mohammedan nations, or what they call ancient Moorish clans, who were anciently called Mauritanians collectively and then individually referred to as Karthadids or Fomorians or Tuatha Danann or whatever. And then on land here, get known as Yamasee, which then which is like the turtle shell, and then under the turtle shell, you get the Creek, the Iroquois, the Haudenosaunee, the this, the that, right? Islam, the Book of Jasher. Thank you, Mo. So again, if this was Roderick, the Roman, and then this is what I'm trying to say. They always got us putting another race in power over us when we was the ones that was always here. We was the ones that had it. So instead of me, so when the prophet said that we are descended from the ancient Moabites, the ancient Canaanites, right? Who in modern times are called Moroccans, he's referring to us in our present state, but it doesn't, and then anchoring us to the ancient aspects of what these people are, not the people that's there today. So the distinction was already made, or via tacit consent already considered through the designation, through the declaration. You see what I'm saying? So I don't got to say that I'm Hebrew. I don't got to say I'm that. When I'm saying I'm a Moor, I'm already saying that. But I'm claiming the aspect of it that maintained what everybody chose to go against, including the Hebrews. That's why they're not supposed to have a nation. That's why I don't know why they beefing. The white man beat you to it. He sacrificed his own legitimacy to set it up. Said, look, these Negroes, these black Moorish Zionists, whatever, we're going to have our own joint. And we're going to beat them to it because technically they still Negroes in America and they ain't honor their prophet. So we still got time. That's why there's a difference between the children of Israel, the nation of Israel, the state of Israel. The children of Israel never supposed to have a nation for themselves again, based upon the transgression against the original covenant. That's what they Torah say. That's what they Torah say. Even the white Jews say that. So why they beefing with us? Because we still got a nation, because we still got a nationality. Like, why you know what I'm saying? Like, it ain't my fault. You ain't want to uphold our law covenant like that. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's not our fault, man. Don't hate on us because we beautiful and because we can wear our feathers and all of that. And they gotta look at it with the same respect they look at a crown or a yarmulke. Don't hate on me because of that. Because you scared to wear it. You can only wear it outside or with writing on it, with somebody's name on it. Like, ain't y'all tired of walking around with leashes and aprons on, man? That's why they're gonna keep it going. This again to show and prove, as we read earlier about the ancient nations who own Texas and all of that and all of Mexico. So remember that part. So this is now talking about specifically the sheiks that ran that part. These are referred to as the Winner Sheiks. Another division of them are called the Winnebagos. But the Winnebagos and the Obago or the Daajal or the Daogo, same people. All Iroquois, also Latin speakers. They pipe carriers was. Anyway, a dirty person, stink money, blah, blah. Winnesheik II. Excuse me, John Blackhawk, grandson of Winnesheik II. See, they do it in titles. Succession, showing kingship. Maintain that the name is composed of both Winnie, short for Winnebago, and Sheik, meaning leader. So, what that says to us, brothers and sisters, is that the word Sheik is a Native American word. Islam, that's what that says, right? But they told you that there was no Indian Muslims. I smashed that a couple of videos ago. But what I'm showing you now is that if the term sheik means leader, and these people were calling them winner sheiks or calling themselves winner sheiks before, right? Before the establishment of what we call Islam or whatever, just like the term Muslim was an old Algonquin word, we found out that it existed here first, and that means the term sheik did too. Which may explain why this brother has a fez on with the horn. As well as this brother. I think it's the same dude. That's the same brother. Put this in full regalia. Islam. As you see the 5-pointed star, Islam. You see the black fez, black mink fez. Who doing that? Who rocking mink fezzes today, bro? Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, don't know European with no thread. You understand that this stuff was made with no sewing machine, no thread, the way that we understand thread, man. You understand? Like, it's ridiculous. Anyway, this is being awesome times. Winner Sheik II, 1812 to 1872. So that means, so this is a sheik. So that means that Wisconsin was ruled by a sheik from 1812 to 1872. A division of the Winner-Sheiks was the realm that the Winner-Sheiks also dwelled in, was called Wakanda, which was the principal. See? That's when everything went crazy. From the War of 1812, that's when everything went sideways for us. Look, these are the names that is named for him. So this is all of the stuff that he owned. Winnesheik Bluff, Winnesheik Bottoms, Winnesheik's Landing, Mount Winnesheik, Templeogue County, Lake Winnesheik, Winnesheik Bluff, Winnesheik Wildlife Refuge in Crawford Grant. And these are other places called Winnesheik in where? Illinois, Iowa, Minnesota. The Moorish Empire, Mauritania, Al-Maghreb Al-Aqsa, Morocco, Grenada, because that's where it was on the map. Didn't we just look at the map and it say that? Yep. Yep. So the same way I'm just showing you how all of these people are related, and they'll go to such extremes that they'll switch their faces and their genders and all of that stuff. That's what they're doing to the planet right now. That's what they're doing to our people right now. They've terraformed them into something to accept the fact that they could be something else. So this is equivalent to Bugs Bunny running off the Elmer Fudd running off the cliff and not realizing that he's suspended in animation, therefore gravity don't exist until Bugs Bunny, the white rabbit, see what I'm saying, brings him down to earth. You see what I'm saying? And then he plunges to his death. That's what getting black people to become socialists are. But that also serves the means of the ultimate goal of the Communist Party, which was the Russian Party. See, the Communist Party transcends the government of Russia and China. You understand? That's the communist bloc. But the United States helped foster that relationship by disrespecting Russia and letting them take all them numbers unnecessarily from the fake war, which was World War I, World War II. A careful study of the names of the native Indian tribes revealed that the many names derived from Arab Islamic roots and origins, like the Anasazi, Apache, Arawak, Arcania, well, it's Chavin. That's where they get Chavez from. It's Chavin, but it's actually Hebrew, like Cholvin. Cholvin, Cherokee, right? Cree, Hohokam, Hoopa, Hopi, Maka, which is Mecca, the Mecca Indians, Mohegan, which is the Mohegan, Mohawk, Nazcas, Zulu, and Zuni. So if the Indian names have Islamic origins, then that means that the Indians came out of the Islamicized Moors. Or actually, they were the associates of the true owners of the land, who were the ancient Mauritanians, i.e. the Moors, and their descendants as Carthaginians and everything else. So, to put the whole thing in perspective with the Phoenician thing also, so that way we know. And then we'll give you the dates and then we'll close out. So, your Native American zodiac sign, because of a lot of stuff that they're not talking about also happening in CERN right now. Like the double suns, the Earth, as we talked about in I think the class before last, exists in what's referred to as a torus field or torus fields, multiple torus fields that exist on multiple bandwidths and dimensional frequencies. So each sphere, meaning each circle on the plane that we refer to as Earth that has its own stars, its own sun, its own moon. You see what I'm saying? That's why when you read the Bible, for instance, it doesn't talk about planets, Venus, none of that. It talks about astronomers, though. It talks about people who follow the stars, but it don't talk about Earth or any of that. They don't talk about none of that. And it stopped talking about Earth as a place per se after Genesis, meaning that they're not really getting into how it was made or how it was remade, because that's actually a redux. The Moors read the Bible from Revelation to Genesis. Remember, we're supposed to be reading from right to left, not left to right. Understand? So the perspective of that is how they also disorientate us when it comes to taking real natural information. That's why all information has to be filtered through your common sense and your wisdom. And you can't really worry about that, because if you prove yourself to be wrong, that's actually a good thing. Nobody wants to be right all the time. I don't want to be right all the time, and I'm not. You understand? Because I'm not supposed to be. However, I'm striving to be right, exact, and correct, as accurate as possible. You know what I'm saying? As humanly possible, which means that I'm striving to leave my ego out of what I'm researching. So I research things the opposite. So I go things, instead of saying, okay, I'm going to prove the Phoenicians is Moors, I go from the opposite. I'm going to prove that Phoenicians are not Moors or not related to Moors. So you know what happens? Everything else proves that I'm wrong. You see what I'm saying? So that means I'm actually right. You see? Before they give you a vaccine, they supposed to put it through a double blind placebo test. You understand? So if they're trying to do that without the test, that means it's not real. Because they can't have a test for that. So in that, they're trying to switch the dates up and all that. So the Phoenicians spoke a Semitic dialect to closely allied to the Hebrew, that the Phoenician and the Hebrew, though different dialects, may practically be regarded as the same language. That's the same way I say yo in New York and they say Joe in Chicago. I say, what's up, homie? They say, what's poppin', cuz? You see what I'm saying? It's the same language, but they say it a little different. Okay? The Bloods in the Hoover criminals is different than the Crips. You know what I'm saying? And the Bloods, for instance. You know, and then they're different from the GDs, but they all are in a cycle. And then they're different in a sense as well from the Peace Stone. But everybody see the Peace Stone as like the root. And who are the Peace Stone? The Moors. You see what I'm saying? So the Hebrew, that Phoenician and Hebrew through different dialects may practically be regarded as the same language. As it was previously related, there were 11 Canaanite tribes: the Sidonians, like Sidonia in Arizona, the Hittites, the Jebusites, the Amorites, Girgashites, Hivites, Arkites, Sinites, Arvadites, Zemarites, and Hamathites. The Hamathites are also who they call the Hashishim, or who they call the Assassin. Hebrew has its origin in the Canaanite language. Okay? So, two, you can't put two out of the one. One got to be first, and then you get two. So, the Hebrew language, again, similar to the Canaanite, which means it was similar, but it wasn't the same. That Canaanite eventually developed into what we call the Punic Latin, or Hebrew, which then got translated into the Maya and the Aztec and all of that. Which then in the 13th century, after the invasion of Genghis and the Tartars came over, Abu Bakr and them came over, and they mixed the Mandi or the Mandinka. This is why we have jurisdiction and dominion in so many different places. So we're a 7-clan basic system with 2-clan moiety. Il and Bay basically at the top. Il and Bay together is Baal or Baal or Baal. That's why we say things like we're ballers or we ball so hard, right? Right, because it's Bay and El, who they tell us in the Phoenician people were sacrificing people to, but when we read the actual stuff was going on, it was the opposite. When we read about the stuff the Chaldean mystics was doing, and we read about what the Elamites and these people was doing, how it relates to what we was already doing over here, it becomes apparent that this was the global culture society that built all of these Tartary buildings and all of these mounds and all of this stuff that continued the culture no matter where they was at. So if they was in Spain, they was speaking, let's say Arabic, but it was all, no matter what culture you was, that was what it was. If you was in the steppes, you was speaking Kurdish, but it was still, Latin was still the thing that you could speak to do business with everybody. Anybody have any questions? Working on that now. Praise Allah. Hopefully it's real soon. It's gonna be crazy too. One second. Anybody have any other questions? It was a lot, but couldn't even get into all of it. One more. Okay. In the expansion after the Abbasid, what they refer to as the Abbasid Caliphate popped off, the Moors of the West split from the so-called Arabs and the ones under them. After that first generation of ones that had been learned and figured out how to like actually be in society, they actually moved Islam along, so much so that they were given, limited dominion, like the Mamelukes. And so through that, about 250 years after that, we had already established what we know as the Renaissance of Islam in Spain and everywhere else. And so that's when they finally conspired with the so-called Romans, who we know today is part or were part of the Savoys, who themselves again were the ones who displaced the original Ethiopian monarchies, what they call the Tewahedo, and then put themselves in power in Axum. And then as Christians, worked alongside with what became the Sabaean kingdom. And then they both gave money to their efforts in Europe in financing what would become the fall of Carthage. See what I'm saying? And all of that. but we are taught it all in fragments, and that there was no governing world dominant. If we had kingdoms on the 30th parallel on every continent of the planet, that means that they was there prior to all of that. So that was a continuous means of commerce. You can read more about that in the book Golden Trade of the More. So in terms of the breakdown, 1451 the Dum Diversus, 1491 the Te Deum, that's this actual selling of the kingdom to Isabella with money provided by the Medicis. You can read about that in the book O.S. Anomicus, as well as the book Ancient African Presence in Early Europe. 1776, the Cahokia rebellions and all of that goes down, and those Moors there basically are the ones who link up with the white slaves who are now trying to free themselves from the so-called British. But they didn't break away from the greater so-called Moorish Empire. They just wanted to break away from the British rule, right? That's why Washington made that clear through the letter, claiming that the United States would be an attachment to the Moroccan Empire. Then we go to 1811, 1812. We see the New Madrid earthquakes, and then the fighting of all of the Moorish sheiks, also called winter sheiks or chiefs or whatever. All of them do this upheaval between, let's say, 1812 and 1811. It basically starts to pop off, and in 1812 we get the New Madrid earthquake. Also in 1976, they had the conference at Wilhelmsbad with all of the European Freemasons making a deal with the American Freemasons to marry into their families. You can read about that in Albert Coyle's Masonic Encyclopedia. 1812, Masonic War starts. Let's say from there all the way up to 1872, basically, but let's say 1812. Then 1815, Mount Tabora erupts, which then causes another universal upheaval of everything. By 1820, they create cameras, so now we're starting to document what's happening to us, and then now they start to switch up everything. So that way, by 1830, we get the Trail of Tears, and those Moors in Oklahoma eventually begin to rebuild the towns and stuff that we begin to know as Greenwood and all of that. And 1859, the Carrington event, that's a universal geostorm that they never talk about, that happened, that displaced ships and destroyed buildings and flooded whole parts of Europe and all of that, which also helped get us out of there. Then we get to the Freemasonic Civil Servant War, 1861 to 1865. Then by the end of 1865 to 1867, we get the establishment and the coup d'etat. So that way, by 1871, the Act of Congress establishes the United States with its own citizens. It has already taken control through the Louisiana Purchase that happened somewhere between 1812 and 1859, and which all of the Moors who were going to be free either had to fight or face redesignation. So that way, by 1871, it was already 1867, they take over North Carolina, it surrenders. That's the last bastion of the Republic. And then by 1890, they create film, or Oscar Marshall is freaking the so-called film industry, which is then basically usurped from him to create the illegal minstrel images of us that have taken place from the birth of a nation to now. So the one thing that's certain is that through all of that, we can still declare our nationality today and basically undo as much of it in our personal lives to the point where we can actually do something collectively about it as well. That's more than anybody else is talking about or saying in terms of solution-based material. They just want to keep talking about how bad it is and how it ain't going to change. Well, it ain't going to change if everybody continue to use the slave brands and continue to act like that these things belong to Arabs and has nothing to do with them. Arabs don't even use symbols and flags and all of that. They only started using that after Hollywood, after Sean Connery played the last Moorish pirate, Rasuli Abdullah El, in 1910. when he was kicking Teddy Roosevelt's behind up and down the Atlantic. But again, if you want to even see that, you got to get the movie The Wind and the Lion, and then you got to envision black people as the Moors and not see James Bond in the turban playing the noble. So this is what I'm saying. So anybody want to holler at me, hit me up at houseofl@hotmail.com. Remember, we all family, and just like we all family, the enemy, all of them people family. In the northern southern jurisdictions, the Freemasonic wars and all this crap they doing, that shit ain't really got nothing to do with any of these houses here. But as they said, the Alawite, house of the Alawite is why we're called white. So in the original whites, when they said white man, white, the Saadite, these were the these are the Sidonians. The Wattasid would be like the Hittites. The Marinids would be also what they call the Amerinid. When you look up historical stuff, look up the Amerind people. The Amerind peoples from the house of Marin. These are or the one of the Moors connected to Persia, more Asiatic. Almohad, that's like my Queen's people. Those are the ones that built these are like the Hebrews, built the Alamo and all of that. The Almoravid, these are like the Pashas, who we call the Turks. They're the ones who took over after the Almohad left. And then under all of that, you had the Idris or the Idrisi. These are the descendants of the old so-called Moors, like the old high priests. They were the ones that kind of kept a lot of that going. And then in North Africa, this would transcend into tribes like the Bambara, the Hausa, the Tuareg. You know what I'm saying? These type of people. So this is not necessarily saying that just because you a Pasha, you're, from Turkish, whatever, just say that whatever you divine, this is essentially the house by which you would be recognized in the clan. So Moors had prides and we had clans. So in the last epoch, we had clans. Clans is usually matrilineal based, but that doesn't mean the matriarchy, women, is running everything. It just means that it's done in behalf of the women to preserve the empire, and women have equal say. That was the difference between us and the Pale Arabs. You know what I'm saying? And yeah, I think that's it. If we start speaking our Punic Latin today, then yeah. all we needed one generation to be speaking it, of our children to be speaking that to one another. It's a wrap. They could literally probably speak us out this reality. You know what I mean? If done right. We just got to have the right environment for the houses all to be represented. Same way the Jews do. Same way the Hebrews do, right? They done created tribes for themselves and all of that. But we know C. Freeman L. taught us that all of those were really just based on zodiac signs anyway. So even when we talk about the Moabite and Hittite and all these type of tribes, and even these are just variations of alchemical principles that culminated in the ones that established these houses. See what I'm saying? For all we know, we're going to create something whole different from this. But the basis is always going to be the same. Yes, because Latin is where all the Romance languages, English, Latin, German, French, that's where all of this come from. Arabic is where it all come from. Hebrew, it all come from that. Remember, the Romans got it from the Levantines. The Levantines got it from the Etruscans. The Etruscans got it from the Phoenicians. The Phoenicians were Carthaginians. And then everybody else got it from that. And then it was all over the world. That's why everybody spoke it. And then eventually, as nations developed, kingdoms developed, people started having dialects from that. So the people in Gaul spoke French Latin. The people in Germany spoke German Latin. People in England spoke English Latin. See what I'm saying? People in Arabia spoke Arabic Latin. So don't let these scholars and these crazy people and these fake Hebrews and these niggas make you divided in your mind of what's really going on. We're one family of different Mohammedan nations, of clans. So let's just figure out which one we in and then focus on that. Islam? All right. All right, everybody. Sorry I couldn't get into everything. But if you need anything else, hit me up, houseofl@hotmail.com. Peace. In Ruia Enos, Romum mortis, Preconium alut laudes, locus frutiferis absita, magnum laureum.